Hey everybody. So today is November 30th, the last day of November, and I think this will go out on December 2nd or maybe the 3rd. I think it's the 2nd. See, this is going to be 308, so 306 will go out tomorrow, which will be the 1st, and 307 will go out the day after that, which will be the 2nd. Oh, so this one will go out on the 3rd. So one thing is that I think what I learned over the last three episodes is that you really shouldn't do any allow any of your data to be used or manipulated in any way if the form is in an invalid state. And I think that that is like so simple and obvious, but for some reason it was one of those little simple obvious things that slipped through the cracks in my brain. So I'm glad that I got that. And that is sort of the nature of being a software developer, is that we all have sort of these gaps in our knowledge and we don't know where they are. They're just sort of like mental landmines that you hit. And anytime that you can remove one, and then the better and more knowledgeable you get, the more valuable every one of those removals become. So, like, it always cracks me up when someone complains about like going to some sort of learning event or participating in some sort of learning where they're like, I only learned one thing in 2 hours, and it's just like that is a big win. Like when you are just brand new to something, sure you want to be a sponge and just be absorbing tons of stuff, and you want to learn a lot of things. But once you start to become really really good at it or really understand it, then anything that fills in a gap for you is gold. And all that. So, anyways, I think that was gold for me. Over the next year, I imagine, on these things, I will start implementing that, and I will be on high alert for any time where that ends up being a bad idea. So, just to reiterate, that is when any form is invalid, no processing happens on for with that data. The data is locked down. Whatever we do with that data doesn't happen. And I think this happened because basically I think when the authors of these form schemes, this uh, reactive forms, when that happened, they said, "Oh, hey, let's." When that happened, they said, they assumed that like people would be filling everything out and then hitting a button, and they were saying disable the form until the buttons clicked. But that just like, while that was, I think, a really good idea and really probably ideal, it's just not the way people like to work. People like to see, they want immediate gratification. They want to hit the button and see a response, not wait until they've done all their stuff and then hit the button. Typically, that's just the normal. So, anyways, there's that. I think I should. This is just the code I have here is just dead code. So I'm just going to commit that because I don't think it adds any value to the next um, set of information. So if I do end up having like a freak out bailout sort of um, situation, I don't want this code to be in there. I want this to be gone, and I do want something, a commit that explains specifically what I was trying to, what my intentions were, and that was removes dead code. So if you look at that and you look at this comment, you'll see that my intention was to, it's kind of weird, you 22 hours to remove dead code. Um, Unfortunately, the IDE hasn't caught up with it. I wonder if I do like git push, if that will make everything come up to speed. So, so that's that. And one thing I do want to say is that in other, there's all kinds of domains, and one of the different very interesting domain to me is called linguistics. In linguistics, they have like two things. They two when they talk about words and stuff, they say they're either doing prescriptive or descriptive, and they're saying how it's supposed to be used as prescriptive. They're saying, hey, you, when you use this, this is how you should use it. And then there's descriptive. It says when people use this, this is how they use it. So I am creating a prescriptive thing that says, hey, whenever you're using form data, you should only use it if the form is valid. That is not a descriptive. I've never seen that anywhere. Everywhere I know, they just do stuff on the keystrokes and whatever, and stuff breaks and whatever. So I am prescribing to myself the concept of don't do anything unless it's changed. So now last time um, we did a little search for this, right? Because the concept of getting a this is an exception value. This is a value. All values should be replaced. That's what this code does. If it's legal, do nothing. Then it says if it's um, so we'll just add this or an exception value. And then it's not legal and the previous was legal, overwrite with previous. Making sure your comments are right is so important. I cannot believe how I would say that, like, in my professional life, 3 out of 4 lines of code are wrong. They're just wrong. They don't of comments. They're just wrong. They actually are a lie, and it's important because as code changes, if you don't change the comments, the comments become untrue. Okay, so that looks good. That looks good. Okay, so basically what I want to do is for my, I know I can say const legal or exception exception oh my gosh, exception values equals, and then this dot validation, I think it's called validation service dot get overwrite exceptions validator, and then we're going to give it the validation tokens. So basically this is going to return a list of all oh my gosh, that is not what I want. Could have sworn that'll be interesting whenever we watch this. Get overwrite exceptions for token. Could have sworn I just did that a second ago. This dot, no, it's not this, it's validation tokens. Get overwrite exceptions for token. Well, first of all, oh, okay, it only takes a single token, so I need to iterate over the validation tokens. Okay, so current validation token. Okay, so these are our validation tokens. They get passed into this. I kind of forgot that. Okay, so validation tokens dot for each. So where I work, we call these lambdas. Whenever you make a function like this, it's called a lambda function. I could have sworn a lambda function was, well, part of a default is that a lambda function is only does one thing. So let's go to ChatGPT. Oh, you're so slow today. Okay, what is a lambda function in JavaScript? Lambda. Lambda. Let's see. Refers to an anonymous function or function expression that is typically combined with an arrow function. Is called a lambda, but it resembles an anonymous function in other way. Okay. So yeah, no, they're right where I work. That's a good thing to learn. That is kind of brings me to another kind of thing. Is that when you're this, I think these videos that I'm doing are good for two situations. One, if you're like extreme, if you know a lot already, are really good. If you already know a lot and you just try to pick up little tips and tricks, I think this is a. I think I run into little things and then I thoroughly examine them. So if you are like, all right, you're just trying to fill in a few gaps. The other thing is if you have no idea how to code or how coding happens. I think this is how it happens. The only difference is typically once you've gone a couple hundred hours of coding and you've got that under your belt, you'll start to sort of dip into like a lizard brain sort of mode where you're just sort of a zombie and you're just kind of coding, and then when you come out of it, you've written a bunch of code. um, and like whenever I used to wear a fitness watch back before they started using data to ruin our lives, I used to wear a fitness watch all the time, and it was always amazing because my heartbeat would drop into the low 40s, my pulse, everything would get really low while I was in those modes. So it was definitely a non thing. And then if someone sort of woke me out of that mode, it would always take me 10 to 15 seconds to recalibrate my brain into speaking human language again. So it was just sort of as dropped in a lower machine state language mindset. So, we don't do that here. But the problem with that is that you don't really remember what happened, and you can't really explain what you did, and that's kind of a miserable place to be. So you don't. It's important to do that because you can get a lot of work done very quickly, but it's also important to do this where it's much slower, but you understand better. So this is a validation token. That is the argument that's going to get passed in. I'm going to name it validation token, and it's of type validation token types. And then over this, it only wants one validation token, right? So now basically what I think I'm going to get is just an array with my exception values in it. And this thing that I passed in is a lambda. So it was funny. I was actually working with my boss last Wednesday, and he goes, "And now add a lambda," and I was like, and then we actually had a conversation about that, and then he goes, "A fat arrow," and I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." So that's our validation token. Now the thing is we do need this. We need access to this outside of this. Right now, the way this is set up, um, it only has a the scope of it is only between on 292 and 293, but we actually need the scope of it to be lower um, because we need to know what it is. And actually, we do not need the scope of it to be lower. What we need is some way of determining if the value is current. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let, and I'm going to say is valid, is overwrite, is overwrite value. So, and that is equal to false. By default, we're just going to say false, and then we're going to loop every one of our token types, and then we're going to set it to true if if the current value happens to be equal to one of the exception values. Now, getting access to this inside of this function is known as a closure, right? So this can see outside. And the thing is there are certain circumstances where you could pass this function someplace outside of that and it'll still have access to that, and that code can be extremely difficult to understand because this function could be getting used in some other place where it has access to these values, but you can't see it in the code that you're actually authoring at the time. So, anyways, I don't see that as much. If you go back about 8 years to all the code, it was just riddled with code that had access to values that you can't see in the code that you're writing. So it gets executed in a certain place in a certain context, and it still has access to that context. Um, so because you can get a function and then pass it, execute it, and then pass that whole function to something else, and that context still exists. It's very confusing. If this is the first time you're ever hearing of this concept, there's no way that I actually explained it in a way that you can understand. And it's just such a complex and weird concept that I don't even think it would be technically possible to explain it. It's the kind of thing that you have to hear and experience a bunch of times, and then eventually it just clicks. And one day it clicks, and then you're there. And if you're ever doing an Angular or a React, Angular JS or React or vanilla change of code from to TypeScript and to these, that's probably the most challenging part, is understanding when you have uh, scoping issues. Scoping issues are really hard because Angular kind of hides a bunch of that stuff from you. But anyway, so here, now we have our exception values. We know that they are, so and that's an array. So we're going to want to take our exception values and we're going to want to loop over that. So now we have that, and then we're going to send it our lambda in, and then these, we're going to call these an exception value, and they're strings. And we are going to then compare the exception value to the current value, which is up here. So since this is down here, and my understanding is this is the reverse of most languages. So in JavaScript, the child can see anything in the parent. But in my understanding is in most other languages, and I don't really know this, but I've heard that in most other languages, the child can't see what's in the parent, but the parent can see what's in the child. And that is sort of a whole, like, if you came up in JavaScript sort of the way I did, then that whole is just obvious. But apparently, like, if you came up in Java or C# or something like that, that can be real mind-bending. So anyway, so now I just want to say if the exception value, which in this case is just a decimal point, is equal to the current value, then we're going to send this, we're going to set is overwrite value equal to true. So while we're here, let's just go ahead and just do a console log of our exceptional console log. Oh my gosh, what is that? I don't even know what that is. Log. And then we'll just say, and then on the next line we'll console log. And then you got to be careful when that console reporter, like when something like that brings in, sometimes it'll actually import libraries, and so you got to check that. It's one reason it's really important to like thoroughly examine your commits before you commit. So this one, see the current value, exception value, they matched. And so there's that. But current value is 2, our exception value is 0. But then it was fine. It was a legal value. Current value is A, exception value is 0, and then we got this. This is the behavior we want. So let's go ahead and use our is overwrite value. So right now what we have is and current value, but we're going to say is overwrite value. And I kind of like to do this, like break it. Wait for this thing to reload. So it overwrites broken and then fix it. And okay, what am I doing wrong? Oh, it's is exception value. All right, what am I doing? What's just happening? Oh, it's overwrite value. Okay, now hopefully it works. So we went from a working stage, we did a refactor, and now we're going to go to we went to a non-working stage, and now we're going to go back to a working stage. All right, so that's good. And then I think that's perfectly useful. Okay, let's go ahead and get rid of the console logs. And I guess I'm probably not being as aggressively fast coding because I don't have the time constraints I normally have when I'm trying to make these videos. So I don't know, you probably are not in a relaxed vacation mode at the moment, so I apologize. But you know, life is life. It just kind of things work out the way they work out. So let's go ahead and look at our before and after. Let's expand this. So this is our before and after. Wow, we coded the whole time in Git mode. So I think this is a good place to do a commit. The next step will be to pull this code out into its own little function so that in the other place where we need this, we can just reuse that. And then we're done. Now, if it feels like Groundhog Day, which was a movie that was about someone experiencing the same day over and over again, it is, because we kind of went down this path before, and then everything got kind of weird because there were some form issues that we resolved, and now we're kind of coming back to doing this. So add dot git commit dash m video 308. This is another thing, is I upgraded, you know, one of the people that watches these videos said, hey, why don't you do this in 1080p? And I did. These videos are so much bigger on my hard drive now, and it is kind of funny the journey we go through, because I originally was doing these in like in a Microsoft tool, and the biggest reason I moved away from that Microsoft tool was because the videos were so big. And then so I moved to OBS, and so I started using OBS, and then I found out that you could actually put your own little image in here at the same time, and people kind of like that, so I put that in there, and that was good, but now I'm back to 1080p. I'm guessing that's what Microsoft was doing before, is it was putting it in 1080p, and now I'm back to 1080p, but now I have these giant things, but I still have the picture, so it still makes sense to stay in OBS. But it is kind of funny how we go through these interesting journeys. Uses service validation service to list of overwrite exceptions. So this is like kind of like if you have people that just read the comments, like you have management and they just kind of read the comments and they're trying to figure out stuff, like they probably won't be happy with this comment. But this is probably a very good comment for developers because you're actually looking at this stuff. But if you're just trying to get a, like if you have some manager that like wants to understand what's getting ready to go into the main code base and go out to production or something, this is probably not the kind of, there's not enough context in this, but because they're typically not actually looking at the code when they're reading the comments. So, you know, just like know your audience um, when you are making commits. Anyways, let's see. That, I'm sure that was really long. 26. Yeah, normally that's probably a 10, 12-minute video. I guess I was a little bit sloppy today. But anyways, happy coding, everybody. Bye.